This is Political Core, the non-PC edition of The Erin Cruz Show, where you decide the topics. The only place where you get the news you want from the people you trust. We are your balanced and accurate information resource.
Good evening and welcome to the Erin Cruz Show, coming to you live from Palm Springs, California. This is Political Core. I am your hostess, Erin Cruz. Thank you for joining me. Tonight's topic is about the corruption in Congress and in government. Shocker. And we will also be discussing the non-action on Obamacare, AHCA, and the ability to take action on everything else but Obamacare for Congress, as it seems, especially even the money that's padding the pockets of government. They seem to be able to find that in the time to legislate, but little time for anything else. We'll also talk about the double standards, and we'll talk about Trump tweets. Whoop, whoop. We'll talk about the good and the bad and the ugly there, and then you can decide what you think about that. So, as far as I'm concerned, Trump, we can just let them keep guessing because he's thrown a few, funny words out there that have got the media just churning. So let's go ahead and get to this. So I was actually taking a look today. We've had some things happen across the world. Unfortunately, we're seeing a magnification of Islam and its rot. Muslims are taking their actions to the extreme and making an impact in the world, which is just so devastating for so many people. I know I spoke about this last week, and if you didn't hear it, you can go back and look at the archives. Just so many people have been touched in a very harmful way by Islam and Muslims who are carrying out their duty according to the Quran. So I wanted to touch about how this affects us here in the United States. I know in the UK is where we're seeing a lot of the hot spots. Of course, there's always hot spots in the Middle East, but primarily right now it's in the UK, and then we aren't without our own impact here in the United States from Islam and Muslims who've taken it to the next level in their own religion and belief systems. So and today, I believe, marks a couple of anniversaries. It's just so sad. But because there have been these tragedies, I think it's good to talk about what is really going on and what we can do as a people, how we can impact our communities and interact within our own space to better handle the things that are going on across our nation and across the world. So as I was taking a look, I've talked with many people, thousands of people over the years on Islam, and arguments and debates and conversations, and some heated and some not. I know at one point I had gone through pretty much, took me several days. I know this sounds strange, but I went through, I didn't see that the numbers were matching across the Census Bureau, because they really don't ask certain questions, but they ask others. But the numbers weren't adding up. And I remember going through and taking a look at some of the religious organizations throughout the nation that kept track of these numbers and where they got their data, and then comparing it to mosques and attendance and different Islamic organizations that had reporting, and kind of cross-checked, and it's grossly out of sync with what the Pew Research Center and other notable organizations put the numbers at. I think that at that time, that was back into around 2015, late 2015, 2016, that I had put it somewhere around 2.3% of the U.S. population. Now, the Pew Research Center puts Islam population at about 3.3 million Muslims of all ages living in the United States in 2015. That's roughly 1%, at that time, 1% of the U.S. population. Again, that's from 2015. And in contrast, because I think it's important, we are a Christian nation, I believe, and others may not believe that. We've fallen far from our roots, but I think it's important that we touch on, other religions that we have here as well, because the interaction is important. We've seen the interactions overseas, and here, as we begin having more and more of certain segments of the population arrive on the scene with certain views, it could become a real problem. And so I think it's notable to mention. So in contrast, we have about 3.3 as of 2015, these old numbers. We have 1% of the U.S. population, 3.3 million of Muslims. And in contrast for Jews, we see about 5.7. One other number I saw was 5.5. But I'll go based on the same timeline, which was 5.7 million for Jews in 2015. And for Sikh, we see basically a couple of varying numbers, which is interesting because the Sikh Americans, basically their coalition group, okay, their advocacy group says there are more than 500,000. That's 500,000 here in the States, okay? But Boston University says there are only about 280,000, okay? And that's in 2015 as well. So that's almost in line with kind of what I was seeing, was that, the official numbers from some of these organizations were almost half, of what I had found when I added up my numbers. It's really hard to say, actually, to get a hard number, unless you actually look at those research type studies like we see out of Boston University, where they've been keeping track of these things for quite some time. So for the Hindu, we also see about 2.1 million, which is, a little bit less than Islam at that period in time. And so now you might be also wondering a little bit about why I'm mentioning this too. I know I said I wanted to kind of bring up the kind of melting pot idea and how that's impacting us as a society, but really, what I find most interesting is for all of the other religions combined, okay, here in America, we do not see, or at least I'm not seeing it in the news and hearing it from community members. Here and there you hear a little bit of something, but nothing pronounced. But for all the other religions combined here in America, we do not see this sort of entitlement and pushing forth of religious requirements by the other stated religions. And I know there are many, many more than the ones that I mentioned above, and I don't want to say that they're any less important, but I mean, it would take me a great deal of time to go through all of them. But, we just don't see that kind of entitlement, pushing forth the religious requirements by the other stated religions. And sure, I think these other practicing persons have their requests, but they're not pushing and prodding to change our entire infrastructure and makeup, right? They're not trying to impact our culture and society as Americans to fit their own beliefs. And that's not an entirety, because I'm sure there are these, small situations or maybe particular groups or pockets that may be, in a position where they're looking to have more flexibility for their children in school or whatever it might be. But for the most part, these, even if these particular religions live closely, I mean, we just don't see them making the pushes in the schools, in the sections of government, within communities, pushing for these sorts of regulatory change. I mean, it has come to the point here in the United States where it's almost, even despite their populist position of one, just be gracious and say the 1%, it's become almost a point of non-freedom for those that are not Muslim. Okay? I mean, you need to really think about this. And I'm not being Islamophobic. I'm just saying the obvious. Let's just not beat around the bush here. I mean, it is what it is. And what ways that we see this would be, you know, and I've talked to a couple people today about this, is the halal options for school. Okay, you have halal options, and then you have mandates, you know, where now, you know, certain schools won't allow certain foods to be served because it might upset certain populace within the schools. You know, it's just gotten to the point where it's so ridiculous. I mean, for the Muslims, in particular in the schools, what I've heard in talking to people is that, you know, and as a mother, it used to be you sent your child to school with whatever it was that they were going to eat. If they were going to have a school lunch, then they were going to have a school lunch, what it was offered on the menu that they wanted, that met their dietary needs or restrictions. My son was a vegetarian, so he chose vegetarian options if he was going to have school lunch. That's just how it was. Not anymore, sunshine. Not anymore. It's them demanding that the schools provide halal meat. Okay? And the schools just don't have the ability. And in the UK, I'm going to shift to the UK because what we're noticing, and it's a trend, and I've seen this across media, and some people are starting to really talk about it. I know I've been talking about it for a couple of years with many of my close friends in media and otherwise. We've seen that the UK is a couple of years ahead of us. I mean, where this is going for the United States is not pretty, people. We need to make serious changes to the way we are looking at things and allowing things, culturally speaking, within our borders. Okay? Freedom is freedom is freedom is freedom. Your freedom shouldn't step on my freedom. Amen? So, what we're seeing in the UK is a situation where they literally have turned, because school systems are you know, in a position, and this is not just for the school system, because this is other areas as well, but this is just an example, okay, where they're in a position where they just can't not offer two kinds of foods. They can't afford it, right? It's cheaper for them to get the all halal food for the some Muslims than it is for them to get two options and then have the children choose one option over the other option because of sourcing and price and cost and everything else. But what this has done is it's alienated a people. And the interesting part is that the same people that it was supposed to help, they're using it in a way where it's impacting others negatively. Okay? We have now the Sikh population, which is in the UK, and traditionally they are in the position of not eating halal food. All right? And what we're seeing now is that in their structure is different over there, and I recognize that. But what we're seeing is that now they're forced, as a smaller population, to sit out and say, we can't eat that, or we're not able to eat that. It's according to our religion. It's something that we cannot do, and that to me is just wrong. So, you look at, for example, if you were to take that and translate that to the United States, we have approximately, 500,000 Sikh, and then we have, a couple million Muslims. Well, why should one party be forced over another party to embark on this kind of sort of need to, and I'm searching for the word, I guess it just doesn't sit with me to step on one person's religion and freedom for your own personal religion and freedom is just wrong. And so when we look at that, we have to think just on the basis of what's right and wrong. And religious freedom is what it is, but at what point is somebody else's religion more valuable than another's? At what point is their belief system somehow more important that, the state dollars go that way as opposed to another direction? Okay, and then that's 1%, 2%, 5%, whatever you want to call it, whatever direction for the total populace there. Over the other 95% that are now having to foot the bill for the more expensive product. Okay? All right? The taxpayers essentially getting the shaft on all of these sorts of regulatory byproducts of this cultural push for social change, okay, based on religion. And while I like to try to be understanding about religious beliefs and freedoms, there's a certain point where we just have to say enough is enough is enough, okay? I also want to touch on the fact that, many times what we're seeing and what we've seen come through are that the schools are now being forced to give prayer times to Muslims, okay, out of classroom prayer times. And some, like I saw, somebody had given me information on a particular school here in California who was looking to fund putting in a foot bath and a prayer room. Okay? Taxpayer dollars. Look, I don't know about you, but I've been a Christian for a long time. I was pretty much born into the Christian faith and made the personal affirmation when I came of age to move forward with my faith. Well, you don't see me saying that I need a special room for prayer. Okay, when I was going through school, and I certainly wouldn't say that my children need that now. If they need to pray or if they want to pray, they can pray wherever they're at. Okay? It's to the point where, look, if you wanted something a certain way, if you wanted to live in a certain way, why didn't you and your family stay where you were that afforded you the opportunity to live in that type of way? There are plenty of nations that are Islamic nations where you can go and you can pray X number of times a day and go do it. Go do your thing. But here in the United States, you have taxpayer dollars that are paying for all of this. And I'm sorry, but I don't want to pay for your prayer room. Many people I know feel the same way. And that's not just for one religion, that's for all religions. Okay? If you're in a hospital and you don't want to go into a faith room or a meditation room or any sort of room like that because there's a cross up there or there's a Star of David up there, that's your problem. That isn't the facility's problem. That is your problem, bucko. And I think that to expect that certain parties are going to facilitate you feeling better about being able to practice your faith, you can practice your faith wherever you want. But don't put the dollar bill on somebody else who doesn't believe or see things in the same way that you do. Your faith, your freedom, does not get to step on somebody else's faith and freedom. End of story. It's that simple. Comes, the same for abortion funding and everything else. Why should somebody who doesn't believe in birth control or abortion have to fund people who want birth control and abortion? It's just, if it's against their religious beliefs, then, they shouldn't have to do that. But in any case, I can go on and on and on about that kind of on a philosophical way and go really deep, but we won't do that tonight. What I really wanted to touch on was the importance of looking at this impact of Islam in the UK and how it translates to our country. We have all of these different parties that live closely, okay? In terms of Their percentages of our populace, they tend to live in pockets, which is natural, especially, for the Jews. Many practicing Jews, they want to walk on the weekends to their religious meetings. That's good for them. They can go ahead and do that. And they wouldn't need to live close, I'm sure, to be able to do that. So they live within close proximity. That makes perfect sense. Okay, but, it gets me when we see what we've been seeing recently, where we have a certain group of the population, which is a very, very small number, okay, if you use that 1%, that are pushing for this social change. And that would include headscarves and work accommodations and these sorts of things that we're seeing all across the nation, in our military even in many cases, exceptions and otherwise. It's to the point where you have to just say there are limits, to what we can afford as a nation and as a society, and bending our social structure. And this is the one group in particular where we see a huge push for social change. And I have to ask myself why. And I think one of the reasons why is we see the shift, okay, and we see the kind of more outward expression of their particular faith within our communities. One of the reasons why is to make it a more socially acceptable religion, and not kind of this taboo, okay, view of Islam. And unfortunately, given the spikes in terrorism and other sorts of hot activity overseas, you can't help but see that there is a parallel. There is a definite parallel in the particular religion and faith and the activities going on. And so when we see that the parties living here in the United States, and they say, well, we're peaceful people. Well, I'm sorry, you are not a peaceful people. One of the things that I like to bring up is that, and not everybody's going to agree with me, and people stand on this differently, but I'm going to say it, is that there is what is called, and I've talked about this before, the fifth pillar of Islam, okay? And this is where people give financially to Islam, the furthering of Islam, and through their mosque. And there are a couple of ways that they spell it, but one way you can look it up is Zakat, okay? That's how it's spelled. And you can go ahead and Google it and look it up. Basically, people give to their mosque, and then the monies are used. It's kind of like a tithe for Christians. The money is used to further Islam. You can give it in forms of charity to, say, an organization like CARE or what have you. And they use it to further Islam. Part of the ways that they further Islam is through jihad. And there's no other way to say it, that there have been links between these different organizations throughout U.S. history, even in back to 2010. We've seen some struggles with the State Department and other organizations reaching out and banning and barring certain transactions. It was quite interesting as we look back. But those monies that are being used are used for the furthering of Islam. And you have to say that those people giving to those organizations that are funneling money through and out of the United States towards certain groups or leanings, they are indirectly or directly, depending, funding jihad. Okay, and so when you say a moderate Muslim or a peaceful Muslim, if they are funding Islam, you have to ask yourself, just because you aren't committing the murder, if you're funding it, are you complicit? I'll say that again. Just because you are not committing the murder, if you're funding it, are you complicit? Well, it's a good question. So, I think people need to really look at that, and they need to think about what is a moderate Muslim, because somebody who's practicing may mean two different things. But if you're funding Islam, you are probably more than likely a part of the problem. Okay. Now I want to kind of talk about that in a way where we transition into Obamacare, because we look at the kind of hot spots that we're having across the United States and the way we socially interact with Islam, and we kind of get all upset when these activities happen, where these terror attacks happen, and it's so traumatizing to see the lives that are and the horror in the lives that are taken and wasted. But what it's also doing is it's distracting us from what we need to do here in the States. And unfortunately, the media is no help. Okay? The media is not helping us as a nation. They really just aren't. They are focusing on things like, right now, like climate change. They're focusing on tweets that Trump has been sending out. They're focusing on anything and everything but what is really important, which is healthcare legislation. And why is that? Because they don't want to look at it. Because if they mention it, they have to do a big uptick, and they have to get us all riled up about it, and it's a negative draw. Okay? They can much more easily go on a negative draw on either terrorism or climate change and get, the leftists more kind of moving in a direction that helps them, kind of keep it busy. Alinsky tactics, I talk about that often. Alinsky tactics, overwhelm the system, keep everybody busy. More news, different directions, different views, get everybody riled up, pull at heartstrings, that kind of thing. Propaganda, negative, positive, doesn't matter. Whole point is to keep you busy and away from what we need to get done, which is Obamacare and the AHCA. Now, we heard, and I talked about it last week, that the AHCA was going to be put off until probably the end of the year. A couple of people were saying that in Congress. Well, I think we can push, and we can probably get them done, the Senate to vote on something for August, before August recess. And I was on the Heritage Action phone call the other day, and they were hopeful to that as well. But you have to call your Congress member. You have to get involved, and you have to push them. My thing is this, is that, and I know not everybody's going to agree on this. Sure, repeal would be great. Repeal and replace would be great. But at this point, we just have to get something in there and see if we can't maneuver this to the place where we're actually getting in a better position for lowering premiums, lowering overall costs, and actually maybe just making a shift, kind of taking it to the point where we can get a little, some movement in the right direction. We can always tweak it. They can do amendments. They can go in and do whatever they need to do. They've done that with Obamacare through since 2010. They've gone in and amended. And I mean, how many times? Hundreds of times they mention that the secretary shall. Well, okay, they did that. You want to know why they did that when they passed that bill, Nancy Pelosi, and they were all crafty. They did that so they could go in and they could change the bill without actually having to do anything through Congress. Guess what? Cha-ching! Has anybody looked at the secretary changing this or the secretary changing that? I mean, there are ways that I think that Congress could look at this and really make positive impact in the areas we need it to see the price and the premiums shift downward, that things become more productive. The regulations, sure, they can roll back many of them. They can make them null. They can modify. But I think it's something that we have to get done. We just have to move in a positive direction, and we can, through the process, like we have the last X number of years, make those changes. Okay, either through the secretary or through the amendment process. There are ways to get this done. The point is, and this is what I want to talk about, the non-action of Congress. Okay? They're just, the Senate in particular, they say there's too much divide. They can't agree on this. They can't agree on that. Well, I'm going to tell you what, they can agree. They have historically. They just aren't going to because they don't want to. And I think we as a people, it's our responsibility to tell them they have to. This is what they ran on. They need to stick to it, and they need to make action happen. There are no other options. Midterms are coming up. A few of these people are up for election, and I think that we have to make a point as a people, and not just midterms, but we also need to just make an overall resounding noise that this is not acceptable. What they've been doing, even Republicans taking the House and the Senate, even before that. I mean, it's almost like we haven't even really seen a shift in power. It's just been money, money, money. Whatever money can go in their pocket, whatever deal makes their deal, they'll go ahead and go through. Sure, media will make a ruckus. Sure, they bring up things that stir the people. But really, it's just busyness. Okay? You ever seen somebody at work or in the office or running around the store and they're not really getting anything done? Right? They're just kind of busyness. That's what Congress is doing a lot of the time. Except for when it means their paycheck. Except for it means, when it means their special interests. So we know, I mean, look at that Saudi bill that went through. They literally sent it to the president, not once. They sent it to him twice. You want to know why? Because there is... And I brought this up even before they did it. I said they could do the nuclear option. They could say, look, we're sending it to you twice. You have to put it through. They can force bills through if they want to. But they have to make the wording work. And they can. They just are choosing not to. Okay? And why are they choosing not to? Because it doesn't serve their interests. And we have to make their interests and their job security their focus. They don't get the job done. They don't get to keep their job, period. Okay? And it's bordering right now 6 months. This is more than enough time. Okay, we're pulling up right now. They're looking at Dodd-Frank, and they're looking at some other legislation that they're wanting to go ahead and take action on. They're able to work together when they want to. And I want to talk to you real quick on a few minutes on this Choice Act, which is HR 10. It's up in the House. I think it's up on Friday. And this is a prime example of where they came together and they came up with some language. There was some rallying done, and they figured it out. Okay, they knew that the Dodd-Frank, some of it needed to be rolled back. They knew the regulations needed to shift and change for, overall, our financial security, our economy. We have to make some changes there. And they did it. They came together and they're putting forth this bill. Okay, and it is pulling back about 3,500 plus pages of rules and regulations on the financial industry from the Dodd-Frank. Okay, and some a lot of people are really upset about this, but really the long and the short of it is it protected banks in a way that was just inappropriate. There was pretty much no congressional oversight. Special interests, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau pretty much oversaw it. It was really not, it's just not functionally and in the best interest of the taxpayer and everybody else a feasible policy. And so, but what they did was they came together and they said, okay, we're going to go ahead and we're going to make this work. And so they took some time, but they did it. Okay. And now what we're seeing is that in this prime example, okay, that Congress can come together if they want to. Okay, and in this case, we have the opportunity, it's called the Choice Act, to back them up. Now, this is part of one of the outreaches from Heritage Action, too, from this last week. It's called the Choice Act, and we're going to have a Tweetfest tomorrow. I think it's at 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time, and the hashtag is Choice Act. And it basically helps to stop the taxpayer bailouts, and it holds Washington and Wall Street accountable. It gives a bit more congressional oversight, And it's, I think, a good step forward. It's not full repeal, is what I'm understanding, but it's definitely a move in the right direction. Kind of something. It's not like your Obamacare light, but it's like I would say the Dodd-Frank light, but it's definitely something that I think is moving in the right direction. So if you want to become a part of that, I'll post the link, and obviously you can look up Heritage Action. It's on my resources tab on my website at erincruz.com. But I'll also post the link, and you can, if you're on Twitter, become a part of that, or you can do Facebook and help push that as well. Maybe get this trending and get the media to notice it and move things in the right direction. But this is part of the way that we have to look at this. We need a unified effort to move these bills, move these policy choices in the right direction, and keep Congress moving. Because right now, they're passing all sorts of things, and little of which is what we really need passed to affect our table. How much money we have in our food, in our bank account to feed our kids, and what we could put on our table. It's they're just doing busy work over there, and I know many say that they're doing great things, but I'm going to tell you what, folks. Every day that they're up there is a day, I'm sure, where we could have, if they were home, a lot less regulation. Okay? It's more government is not better. Okay? And it's really difficult because I know I was talking about this the other day, is that, it's hard for government to downsize itself because government is funded by government. Why would they want to shoot themselves in the foot? Okay? It's a kind of like running around in circles, if you will. So in any case, so I would like to see that we could become as unified on Obamacare and the AHCA for the Senate as we have on this Choice Act, and push our Congress members and maybe kind of align the AHCA and the Senate, align that up with the Choice Act tweets, and be able to kind of say, look, you're doing you figured out something on the Choice Act. We also need to do something on Obamacare. So that's what I'm going to ask all of you to please go ahead and make sure that you do, which is reach out to your senators, especially on Obamacare, and then also because this is going to the House on Friday for the Choice Act, to make sure and touch base with your representatives in the House. Okay. Let's see, what else do we have on here to discuss? Well, the corruption in media. Well, that's kind of, I think, par for the course. We have seen them go on and on and on about Trump's new word, which I don't want to give it energy. But what I am appalled at is that our media has become this sort of National Enquirer. I don't even want to insult National Enquirer anymore right now. I mean, by saying that, they become a rag, a liberal rag, and they're basically, the media is going off about a word, one word that Trump says, and they could have that time better spent towards looking at finding good common ground for Obamacare, for, changing that regulation. They can do research on, dozens of policy issues that really matter. But no, people are going off about things in the media that are just not relevant. And I think, and what I've seen this last week, is that people are sick of it, and they're holding the media accountable. They're calling them out. I was on MSNBC today on Instagram, and I noticed that they had posted something, and I don't even want to mention what they posted, but they posted something on MSNBC, and every comment on there was, "You're liars. You're liars. This isn't even news. This shouldn't even matter. There are far more important things to report on." And the topic was anti-Trump. And I think the people are sick. So they're sick of media pulling these kinds of shenanigans. And I'm glad that y'all are standing up. And we have to. I think we have to be very vocal and very clear and concise about our position when media is going off in a direction that's inappropriate and not reporting accurately and being emotive as opposed to accurate reporting. So I'm going to go ahead and, like I do every day that we have our little show here together, I'm going to give you the phone number for Congress. It's 202-224-3121. That's 202-224-3121. Please make sure to call them on AHCA and tell them anything after August is not acceptable. They should be passing something now in the Senate, something that reduces your costs on your end. Where do they stand and why? And tell them what you want. You can also go to the House, so it's house.gov or senate.gov to look up your representative or your senator. You also can look up other resources on my website, which is erincruz.com. You can also send me emails and inquiries to info@erincruz.com. And be sure to like me on social media. It's Political Core. And also you can see me, all things politics, at Wagner Girlie, WAGNER GIRLE on Twitter. And as always, we really want to grow together. We want to find common solutions, find common ground. I'm always here to answer any questions that I can. Do not hesitate to reach out to me, please. Okay, we are in this together. All right. I don't want to just be speaking to the wall here. I get a lot of emails and I have a lot of conversations with people about things that really matter to them and they want them brought up. And I may say them in an off the beaten path sort of way and may not mention names, but we do talk about them. And I do bring them up. So what you have to say really matters to me and it matters to the nation because really it's about all of us, right? So I just wanted to thank you tonight for joining me, Erin Cruz, on Political Core of the Erin Cruz Show. Join me again on Thursday evening from 7 to 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time for the Queen of Politics, where we have a bit more fun while we talk the issues, always with information you can use to make positive change in your community, in your state, and in the nation. I hope you have a blessed evening all. God bless you, and God bless America.
To hear more and to learn more on how you can make an impact or about Political Core and the Erin Cruz Show, visit us online at erincruz.com. That's erincruz.com. Thank you for joining us, and see you at the same time and the same place next week.